Good morning, Ramblers, and welcome to a special bonus episode of Ruddle Me This. I am, as always, your host, Taylor Colonel Pandas Ruddle. And what is this? If you're a regular listener, you'll realise that today is actually Wednesday, not Monday morning. Well, you see, what happened, my fine feathered friend, is Matt, my guest for this podcast, and I recorded this episode many weeks ago, before I think I even knew I was going to do this South Island-wide tour with David Correos, and the subject of today's episode is about the Kiwi pastime, the sport known as rugby. And what had happened was we recorded it back when the whole Up the Wires thing was really taking off, because in my mind I was going to release it pretty much immediately, but obviously by the fact that I'm releasing it now, that did not happen. Other things got in the way, the tour happened, gigs, podcasts, it's all a big mess. So anyway, here we are, and I am going to release the conversation we had as a little Wednesday bonus episode of the podcast, because Matt was so kind as to remind me that the finals of the Rugby World Cup is on this Saturday, the 29th at 8 in the morning, where New Zealand plays against South Africa. So with any luck, I haven't completely missed the boat in rugby interest in this country for a while, and we are going to release this episode. I'm a very unpatriotic New Zealander in that I don't even really know how the game works. I have a very vague understanding of the rules, but I didn't know the difference between rugby league and rugby union before this. That was one of the things that Matt talks about with me. I think we get into it in the start of the episode as to how Matt, what his credentials are, and how he knows about all these different aspects of rugby. And then we kind of just chat about it. I think we get into it a little bit about the whole idea of masculinity in New Zealand, but I think we put a pin in that and maybe are going to come back to it in another episode. So for now, happy Wednesday, Ruddle Maniacs. Let's all welcome to the show our expert on rugby for this episode, Matt Lilley, everyone. Hey Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Taylor, great to be here.
Lovely to have you. Today we're going to be talking about something that I know very little about in true unpatriotic fashion, which is rugby. And you, I understand, are quite a learned gentleman in this area.
Yes, you could say it is definitely something that has been passed down through generations of my family, and I've carried the torch of being a rugby enthusiast for most of my life, through the highs and the lows, and definitely spread some knowledge on the great game here today.
Well, that's good. That's exactly what I need. So I guess to quickly go, because I suspect this will be more of a podcast for people like myself who don't necessarily follow it, but we'll kind of fill in some gaps in their knowledge, I suppose. So my first thing, I guess, I'll just go through what I understand the rules of rugby are, and you can correct me and add things as we go. Does that sound all right?
Yep, sounds
cool.
Good.
So from what I remember from like the couple of games I played as a child, you run at the other team. You're only allowed to throw the ball backwards. And if they tackle you to the ground, they get to have the ball and you have to try and tackle them to the ground. If it goes out, is that thing where they lift up that dude, like, they'll stand in like a group and someone will throw it and then they lift a guy like 7-8 feet off the ground and he grabs it. Is that when the ball goes out?
Yeah, that's called a line out. So that happens in rugby. Yeah. So.
And then I don't know what causes this, but at one point they all go into like a single unit and crash into each other, and I assume try to get the ball from the center of them, which is called a scrum, right?
Yep, that's a scrum. That's
what happens,
one of the best descriptions of a scrum I've heard. So yeah.
What happens? What makes them do a scrum? Like, is there any particular event that makes it happen?
Well, the most common reason for a scrum is usually for a knock on or a forward pass. So that happens if whoever's carrying the ball, drops it and it goes forward, or if they're passing it and they either accidentally or purposely throw the ball forward, it'll be the referee will call a scrum, and then the team that didn't drop the ball, they'll get the ball to put into the scrum.
Oh, I see. Effectively, so it's effectively a kind of reset, but a little bit more complicated than just giving the ball to the other team. It's like they can. I'm guessing it's slightly easier to get it if you're the team that puts it into the scrum.
Yeah, because then so the halfback is the bat person that'll put that ball in, and effectively it serves two purposes really. It gets because it gets both all the forwards, and the forwards are the big, stronger guys in the team. It gets them all in one area instead of all being spread out across the field. So when the ball comes out, the backs have a chance to do something with a bit more space and get out there and do the
instead
stuff
of just
everybody likes to see. But then
instead
it's
of just trying
also
to
a big
dodge the big guys.
yeah, pretty
Yeah,
much. So but then it's also a big, sort of collision and contest to see who's the biggest, stronger sort
yeah,
of guys. Because if you're a lot stronger than the other team, they can put the ball in and you can just push them off it and you get the ball
yeah.
back. So
So then the other rule that I know about is if you score a try, which is, I guess Americans call it a touchdown, but I learned the hard way that you can't just spike the ball. You have to be touching the ball when it hits the ground. Is that right?
yeah, that's a weird sort of peculiarity with rugby compared to
Yeah.
because American football they just have to cross that line and then
Yeah.
yeah they get the touchdown. But with rugby, you have to yeah ground the ball. So that's
Yeah.
either you put the ball down on the ground on on the line or over it,
Yeah.
and then of course you've got that second line that's behind the post, which is called the dead ball line because if it goes that's too far basically because you got that
It's very
yeah
precise.
yeah, because you can't just keep running forever. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
then
so
the
and
last thing that I know is when you get a try, someone's allowed to kick the ball at the goalpost, and if they get it in the middle, you get an extra 2 points.
yep, yep,
And
that's called a
then
conversion.
that
Yep,
also happens when you get a penalty, right? You're like, if someone get what kind of things would cause a penalty in rugby?
a penalty that would tend to be something that's a bit more foul play ish. So they can, it's ranging from anything from something really bad, like literally punching a guy in the other
Oh,
team,
right, okay, yeah,
or
so
to,
just bad
yeah, right
behavior.
down to just being offside. Like because unlike sort of football or soccer, the offside line is just sort of the line from where a previous tackle was, if that makes
Oh, I
sense.
see. It
So the
changes each time
defense,
you're
if there's a
playing.
so if there's a tackle, it then becomes something that's known as a ruck, which is when you see, when someone gets tackled, and then that's where you see like two or three people from each team, whoever's nearby, try and come in and push each other off the ball. And
Yeah,
then from there, basically in line of where that tackle is the offside line. But the
gotcha.
defense has to be behind that until the ball comes out again. So
Was
that's
this is an interesting question that I've had then because I know they have offside in soccer as well or football. Sorry, Jimmy Small will kill me for calling it soccer. Uh, before, I guess, was the game ever played without an offside rule and it was just chaos? Is that why they had to create an offside rule?
I'd imagine yes. I remember I've watched a couple of videos, like black and white videos of rugby from 100 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of it is, just a big, massive 8 to 10 people just in a big huddle pushing each other back and forth until someone can get the ball out. But yeah, it's definitely been a game that's evolved a lot over time, and even in the
Right.
last 10, 20 years, like there's been rule changes and things like that that make it either more physical or more complicated or less physical, less or
Yeah.
a lot of things around safety and all that. So yeah, it's
My
definitely evolved a lot.
One of my childhood memories was they used to refer to something as a spear tackle. What was that?
Spear tackle, I think that's more of a WWE move, I think, isn't it?
Well, that's
From
Edge's finisher in the
yeah,
WWE.
yeah. It's pretty much the same thing, really.
Oh,
Just
just a big
spear
diving
tackle.
like.
Just someone's just come in, just rushed somebody from behind
Yeah,
nowhere
yeah.
and just absolutely smashes them.
Gotcha.
But
Oh,
yeah,
so it is the same. The other one, they what do they used to call it? Head high tackles or something, which would be sort of like where people would get them, grab them around the throat or something and kind of drag them to the ground, right? Which I think is probably not good for the player's health.
yeah. So it's kind of one of the main rules when it comes to tackling. Almost anything goes as long as it's below sort of the neck area.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anything that slips above the head or neck, that's something that causes a penalty as well.
Gotcha.
And then usually, yeah, if it's if you contact, especially now, it's kind of one of those rules that brought in the last 5, 10 years. If you contact somebody in the head, it's automatically a yellow card, and if it seems intentional, it's a red card. So
Right,
it's
right.
yeah, so
Because I know
that can definitely change a game. But
the
yeah,
NFL have like
well, from what I've heard, anyways, they've been really trying to stop concussions and CTE. But I think the big difference between the way they tackle in rugby and the way they tackle in NFL, to my understanding, in the NFL, they basically just put their head down and fly at them and try to crash into them kind of with the helmet. But I think I think in rugby, they at least try to put their head to the side when they tackle someone, right?
Yeah, well, I think that comes down to all that padding in NFL
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you're just gonna get hurt if you do that without it, and so
Yeah,
you kind of got to
absolutely. Yeah.
do it in a safe way. But yeah, no, thanks to Will Smith in that movie, everybody is a lot more concerned about concussions and
Oh, Will
head
Smith
health
did a
and all
rugby
that sort of
movie?
stuff. What's
What
that?
Will Smith did a rugby movie or a
Yeah,
football
he did
movie?
a concussion movie, which was about the whole scandal of the NFL covering up the
Wow.
concussions and
Well, that's
people.
pretty
So
cool. I might
yeah,
have to watch that. So
yeah,
I guess that's the rules. Did I miss anything that you think would be relevant to people that don't know rugby like myself?
yeah, probably just kicking. Kicking plays a pretty big part, especially nowadays in rugby. Like
Yeah.
you'll go through parts of a game where it seems like they're just kicking the ball back and forth over 50 meters. But one thing with rugby that's pretty big is territory and making sure you're down their end of the field. Because if you're down their end of the field, you're closer to their try line, more likely to something happening and you scoring a lot quicker than them. So when you see them kicking the ball back and forth, that tends to be the game that they're playing there. Just trying to,
So
yeah,
the when you kick the ball, that's the only time you're allowed to send it directly forwards, is that right?
yes, yes. So you can
Mm.
only, you have to pass it backwards unless, you kick
And
it.
then if you kick it, does somebody have to catch it, or is it like just wherever it lands, people are now running for the ball there? Like, is there any kind of rule? Because if I'm remembering correctly, if you pass it back and nobody catches it, the other team gets the ball.
Uh, Not quite, because as long as it doesn't go, if the ball hits the ground and if it's gone backwards, the ball's
Y-
still alive and
Oh,
anybody
okay.
can jump on it and the game carries on. And
Yeah,
same
yeah,
if you kick it and and it lands just into an empty part of the field, then it becomes a bit of a mad scramble for
yeah, yeah.
whoever's
Okay.
closest to get that ball. But also, if you if you kick it out, if you kick it out without bouncing, so if you kick it out on the full
Uh-huh.
and you're out, and you're outside of the 22-meter line, so you're further down the field,
Yeah.
it'll go to a line out, but it'll come all the way back to where you kicked it from. So
Man,
that's quite often why, if they're kicking it, they're trying to kick it into the field of play, trying to
yeah,
bounce it in an empty space. So then if it can go out, you get a line out where it went out
yeah.
instead of all the way back. So it's, yeah.
Gotcha. I see. So the main topic of the podcast that I wanted to ask you about, and this we spoke very briefly about this the other day, is we I suppose we'll get on to the Warriors maybe after this, but I saw a comment online somewhere that said that this commenter really loved the type of rugby that the Warriors were playing. And to my completely uneducated eyes, I can't see how there's any difference in like what like your strategy is, because to me it looks like you just kind of run forward and pass the ball backwards along the line until you get tackled, and then you sort of try again, kind of thing. So, um, what are the different styles of rugby that teams can play?
Well, without getting too sort of in the weeds and too specific, with sort of like the Warriors and what tends to happen with sort of New Zealand teams and also sort of Pacific Island teams, uh, in comparison to say teams that come from they play in Europe and England and
Yeah,
all that
yeah.
sort of thing, is they tend to try and run the ball a lot more. Tend to
Mm,
try and get the ball out to the wingers, out to the people in the back line that are a bit faster, a bit more sort of flamboyant with the way they play, and try and do that. Where so other teams will tend to kick and then just try and slowly march up the forward field with their bigger players, with their forwards, try and crash and bash. Where other teams will, which if you're more of a casual viewer or if you're just you're wanting something a bit more exciting, can get
yeah,
quite stale and boring. It's like they're just
right.
moving inch by inch. Where yeah, other teams, like the Warriors at the moment, they've definitely got quite a good quite a good few players that play out in the wing. Like they got a guy, what's in he's the Lesniak, who's probably one of the best wingers
Yeah.
in the competition at the moment, scoring a lot of tries. So that
Ah,
tends to be what most people say when they're playing like a good brand of rugby to watch. And yeah.
Interesting. So this might be a good question to bring this up, but I think pretty much every New Zealander of kind of our generation has heard of Jonah Lomu. To my memory, he was a pretty big dude. Was he like one of the rugby players who would just run through people to get to the other end?
Yeah, so John Aloha, yeah, he'd probably go down as one of the best of all time. And he was a winger as well, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, but that's also why he was so good, is because wingers tend to be the fastest players on the field because they find themselves on the outside where they've basically just got to try and run around people.
Yeah.
And John Alomu was so good because he was one of the fastest players on the field, but he was also one of the biggest.
Oh
So
man.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So not only could he get around you, but he could also run straight at you. And a lot of the times you have got very little chance of stopping that unless you're close to his size too.
Yeah,
And in that
absolutely.
case, if he's running at someone bigger, he'll just run around them because he's a lot faster than
Oh,
them.
I see. So he was like an insanely good athlete, but also just a kind of like a Brock Lesnar, like big, and then you're like shocked at how quickly he can move.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Brock Lesnar is a good comparison. Yeah, if you're familiar with what he's like, and yeah, because there's a
Yeah.
famous video. I think it's from the Rugby World Cup final, a semi-final in 1995, where we played England, and he scored a try where he ran over three people in a row, and then just
Ran
straight
over
through
as
them.
in like in the way a steamroller runs over someone, or like
Pretty much,
oh,
yeah,
okay. So he just took them out on the way to the goalpost.
yeah, yeah, and
Brilliant.
then yeah,
I'm trying to think of other sort of like famous rugby players that most Kiwis might like. Dan Carter was a kicker, wasn't he? Was he like with the kickers? Are they also just normal players, or does he just wait on the sidelines until he's needed to kick a ball?
no. So Dan Carter, he played. His position was first 5'8", and that's kind of a position that is pretty comparable to like a quarterback in American
Oh
football.
yeah, okay,
So
yeah,
that's he's a member of the back line, but he's the first person like standing close to the board, so he catches the ball and then passes it off to everybody else.
oh, I see.
So
So
he
we
can
do have a
decide whether
kind of
to.
role like that in rugby.
Yeah, kinda.
Gotcha.
And then also on top of that, he was the kicker because the person that kicks the goals can be anybody in the team, usually one
Yeah,
of the backs because they tend to be the more athletic ones. But
yeah,
yeah, so he would get all the points, he would set up all the tries, and yeah, in terms of first 5'8", he'd probably go down as he's definitely the best one that the All Blacks have ever had. And then
wow,
over the last 20 years, he'd probably be
gotcha.
one of the best ones in the world. So yeah,
And
and then
then
also he was great in those underwear commercials.
yeah, this I think a lot of people remember him from that. Was it Jockey was the brand that he endorsed or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes,
I
yes.
think I'm from a little town called Dunsandel, and there's another little town in there called Southbridge, and for a time that was all anyone from Southbridge ever used to talk about. Dan Carter's from Southbridge, and that's yeah, like I don't know if it's still like that anymore, but yeah, I remember he was he was a bit like their LeBron, and what was where's he from? The what is it, Ohio or something?
Yeah, Cleveland. Yeah,
Cleveland. They
yeah,
had a statue
yeah.
of him at the at the airport, and then when he left, they were devastated, like their economy took a hit or something.
Yeah, yeah. And then he came back, then it went up again, and then he
I did it
left. And
really.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
In terms of other notable players, like Richie McCaw in my head is kind of like the default All Blacks captain. I guess he's been retired for many years now, hasn't he?
Yes, I think he retired. Him and Dan Carter retired, I think, at the same time after 2015,
Oh,
which
okay, so
is,
they've been
yeah, the
gone for a
last.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was also the last time, yeah, the All Blacks won the World Cup.
Oh
So
no.
pretty relevant. But I mean, it's only happened
Yeah.
once since then. But yeah.
And
But
what was McCaw's role or specialty?
so he was an open side flanker. So basically, what that means is he was in the forward pack, but he was a flanker. So he was on the flank of the scrum. So he was one of those ones on the edge. So
Yeah.
his main position is in defence. He's the first one flying off the scrum, trying to make the tackle, and he's trying to get in and he's trying to steal the ball away when there's someone else has been tackled and there's been a ruck, and he's basically running around. He was known as just going around on defense and just being an absolute pest
Oh,
and
okay.
just going in and just snatching the ball away when you'd least expect him to get in there,
Yeah,
or just getting on and making a tackle and and then just making tackle after tackle after tackle and just being an
yeah.
absolute workhorse.
Wow.
So
Are there
yeah.
any other players that are like kind of noteworthy that might be interesting to talk about for the casual fan?
Um, well, could be interesting. One that most people would know would be Sonny Bill Williams.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to
yeah,
watch him box.
yeah. Well, yeah. He used to box. He used to that's because he did everything in this. Yeah, because he actually because as if you don't know, there's two types of rugby. There's rugby union and there's rugby
Oh
league.
yeah, good point. Let's get into that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, because he was one of those. He's one of the few, probably one of the few players that's been able to actually have success playing both.
Right.
Yeah, because he went over. He came onto the scene as a rugby league player, and he was like a child prodigy at 16, playing for I think it was the Canterbury Bulldogs in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
NRL in Sydney, and then had a massive controversy after about when he was like already one of the best players in rugby league when he was like 22.
yeah.
Decided to just quit his contract and go play professional rugby union over in
Oh, okay.
France, and then eventually come back to New Zealand and play for the All Blacks.
So like, let's get into the two. What are the differences between Union is the All Blacks? Is that the one they play?
Yeah, union. Yeah, but in terms of teams, so rugby union is what the All Blacks do. Rugby league, that's what the Warriors do.
Yeah.
Basically, the main difference is in rugby league, they don't have they have a scrum, but it's slightly different where they don't actually push against each other. It's just the formality where they put the ball in and they take it out. And
Okay.
then also in rugby league has a similar rule set to like touch,
Oh,
where you're running, you're with your team, someone gets tackled, and then there's no real ruck. Basically, that person then just gets straight up, puts the ball through their legs. Their teammate picks it up, and they pass it, and then they'll have 6 tackles
yeah.
to basically march up the field. And
Oh,
then
that makes sense. Yeah.
usually at the end of that, so before their last tackle on the fifth tackle, usually they'll either kick the ball or if they're close to scoring a try, they'll do something to try and score a try.
Gotcha.
And then the ball turns over, and then it'll be the other team's turn to then go up with 6 tackles. And it's
Yeah.
basically this back and forth sort of game where it's a little bit more fast paced. Sort of some people prefer to watch it because rugby union where there's a lot more scrums, you get a lot. It's a bit slower, a bit more stop start. Unless and if you're a bit more of a casual viewer, it can be a lot more confusing because there are a few more rules to it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so for the most part, those are the main differences. But yeah, for 90% of the rules are pretty similar,
Yeah.
which is why you can get crossover and why it's pretty confusing for everybody.
Yeah. And then so to explain to any any overseas listeners or just people that don't follow, the Warriors are they're almost like were they kind of almost like a joke team or something? Because in years past, the phrase of like being, someone would refer to themselves as like a long-suffering Warriors supporter, or there's that phrase of I think it's recently been changed to up the Wars, but I remember we used to say go the Warriors. Like, were they kind of like the underdog team? What is their story?
Yeah, well, so the Warriors, so they play in the NRL, which is the National Rugby League competition, which is the Australian Rugby League competition, and
Oh,
so they're the only New Zealand-based team in the NRL. And
oh,
with
that explains a
rugby
lot.
league, yeah, so rugby league even though there's only one proper professional team in New Zealand, it is quite a big sport, and so
Yeah.
yeah, they get the entire fan base from all over the country, and even the expats living in Australia, they all support the Warriors. So they're very,
Oh,
in terms of
right.
the other teams they play against, they have a very big fan base.
That makes
And
so much sense.
yeah, and they do suck. So except this year. So
So what has changed about them this year? Because people seem to be really high on them at the moment. You said they were like third on the table or something. Like, have they done anything
yeah,
in particular to change?
I think they got a new coach this year. Their coach from memory came over. I think he was one of the assistant coaches at the Penrith Panthers, who are a team based in Sydney, who have been probably one of the best teams in
Hmm.
the last 5-10 years. So I hope that they got a new coach,
Yeah.
and also yeah, and they had like everybody, they had a rough. they had a rough deal over the last couple of years, being with COVID and all the restrictions and stuff. Being the only
Yeah.
New Zealand-based team, they had to spend most of the last 2.5 years playing in Australia with no fans and basically
Yeah.
traveling and having no home games, essentially.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this year's been their first full year since then to be able to actually, play in front of their home crowd
Right.
and
Right.
their home fans and all of that. So that's made a difference. But I think it's more just, yeah, how things go with most professional sports. They signed a few good players, young players are getting better, and just overall this year seem to have figured it out so far.
Oh,
So
well,
far. So
that's
yeah.
good. I guess I hope they keep doing well into the future. I was at for dinner the other day and I saw I can't remember, they were playing someone else, and yeah, just like the whole mythos of the of the Warriors. I didn't really know. I think that was kind of what inspired me to kind of talk about this on a podcast. And I figured there'll be some Kiwi comics out there that are into it. And then yeah, you reached out, and then I remembered I'd seen you do a set talking about rugby like not 3 weeks before or something. So yeah, it worked out quite good. I think we've basically covered everything that I sort of wanted to cover, but we've got a little bit of time left, so I guess we could talk about kind of your experiences with rugby and stuff. Like, you obviously played as a young lad. Are you from Canterbury?
Yes, I'm from Christchurch. I'm from Canterbury, and yeah, I started playing rugby when I was 4 years old, so far too young.
What
I
is
was
the
basically
recommended
just
age?
usually 6 or 7,
Oh
but
yeah,
yeah, but I was tagging along with my older brother, and I was basically running onto the field anyway and trying to steal the ball, so they just
yeah,
let me
yeah.
play anyway. And then just typical sort of just that's all I would do, and being a big boy as you say, like yourself,
Yeah, I suppose I
it
should
was
interject there. Both Matt and I are considerably large gentlemen. You're what, 6'4" or something, you said, right?
yeah, something like that. That was what was on the Tinder profile anyway. Um,
Like in wrestling, your build weight is always like 2 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier than you actually are.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
except yeah. So yeah, because of that, people would always, enjoy. I felt like I was able to play better than the average person just purely
Mm,
based on that, on its own. And
yeah.
yeah, went to one of those high schools that we don't have to name, that they care more about the rugby than they do about the schooling. So it was, literally would be it was one of the weirdest things looking back at my high school experiences. There'd be times just walking down the halls between class where somebody would just yell out just rugby, and it would just be an echo chant of everybody else just yelling rugby, 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 and
Just
it's
the singular word rugby.
just the singular word rugby.
Wow.
And then so I did that, and
The
bashed my body in before I was 18.
you what now? You bashed it in.
Bashed it in, brutal, just
What
bruised and broken everything before I
have you
was
got
18. And
knee
yeah,
injuries and stuff like that?
knee injuries, shoulder injuries, back injuries. But it's all for the love of the game. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's I feel like people probably think this about us doing stand-up comedy, is like they wonder why we'd put ourselves through it. Like I've had coworkers in the past who uh they would come into work on Monday limping after having played a weekend warrior, is that what it's called? When just
yep,
footy at the park or whatever. And I'd always think to myself, geez, why would you do that to yourself? And you're not even getting paid for it. But like, it's that thing, isn't it? People just get into it, and to them, the joy of playing the game, I guess, is worth any of the injuries, right?
yeah. I suppose it's also just that blowing off steam. Some people just need that outlet where they're just crashing and bashing into other people.
Yeah, I
Otherwise, they'll
suppose
probably yeah.
I suppose that's probably part of a bigger discussion about Kiwi men are not particularly physical with each other in daily life, right? But like in what I'd consider a pretty homophobic country, the whole cricket hitting each other on the butt thing is kind of like, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, like that's yeah.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
do wonder if rugby is a kind of like, you get that kind of roughhousing with your friends, and which I've heard is a thing that humans need, is kind of physical uh don't want to say physical contact, but you know what I mean, like a bit of that kind of play fighting thing that you do when you're a little kid with your dad or whatever.
Well, that's rugby culture to a T, really, because basically, growing up in rugby, it's all just that, roughhousing with boys and that sort of thing. And then when you become, when you start playing as an adult with other adults, it's the exact same, but then alcohol gets introduced. So it's an absolute mess. I
That's
can't
after the
tell you.
game, presumably.
Yes, yes, and there's something about rugby players that when you get them away from the field and you give them some alcohol, in my experience, they just love taking their clothes off.
They
So
love taking their clothes off.
yeah, that's how every rugby social gathering ended. But as I remember, is somebody or multiple people getting their clothes off and going outside to do something. So we'll leave it at that. We'll change the topic of that. We don't need to go any further there. But just I grew up in a rugby family, so that sort of stuff would happen a lot. Like I remember my old man, he used to be a referee after he stopped playing, and there
Right.
was one time where he was the referee for one of my games,
Uh-huh.
and this was after the game. When I was probably about 15 or 16, and we were in the showers in the changing rooms, and big old communal shower, like a gym changing room
Those like
type thing.
cinder block wall, like rugby club rooms. Yeah, another one.
Yep. And then we're a team of 15, 16-year-olds all showering in our with the underwear still on because we're not gonna eyeline and all that. And then and then in comes my dad, who had just refereed the game, and he's nearly 50, no self confidence issues, comes in completely naked, and then decides to stand right next to me on the end of the line and give me a play-by-play rundown on how he thought my game went. And then after about 30 seconds, I turned back and most of my teammates have all left and left me there standing next to him. So
I wonder if that's a generational thing or a culture thing, because when I lived in Japan for a few years and I noticed that people were like super comfortable with nudity in the gym locker rooms and stuff like that. It was and I was like, I don't know if it was the generational repression or whatever, but I was always like a bit like, whoa, these are just random guys that I don't know like what's going on here. And but you always see the old boys walk in absolutely zero shame, like not even a towel on, just like yep, all good. So it's this almost could be a podcast for another day about the idea of the sort of Kiwi male what's the word I'm thinking of, repression, but then how it comes out, and you have those friends who get drunk and that's the only time you ever see them express any emotions.
Yep. I mean, well, it's like I have this friend who I've only been friends with for about a year and a half now.
Uh-huh.
He's a workmate, and he's Spanish. He moved over a couple of years from Spain. And so he's very, European people are, they're very, they like to hug, it's a kiss on the cheek, goodbye.
Yeah, very comfortable with physical contact. Yeah,
very comfortable with physical contact. I'd known him for 2 days, and he came up to me to hug me to say goodbye when he was leaving work.
Yeah,
and I nearly was just about to nearly swung on him basically. And it took me about 3 months of being friends with this guy to be able to, be like, okay, you can hug me now, and just be there stiff as a board. So
it's bizarre, isn't it? Maybe we'll have to do a podcast about that in the future. Then we're basically coming up on 40 minutes or whatever it is now. Just want to say thanks for joining me. I learned a lot. I now can say I know the difference between rugby league and rugby union. So that's one of those little things for me. Anything you want to, I guess I'll get your comedian page details coming up. But let's try and bring you back and talk about some other stuff in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Had a great time. Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
And we are back. I hope you found that as informative and as interesting as I did. Really enjoyed chatting to Matt about that. If you feel like checking out more of what Matt's been up to in the stand-up comedy sense, you can find him on Facebook. His comedian page is Matt Lilley Comedian, Lilley, excuse me. And then if you follow him on Instagram, you can see his adventures where he posts a lot of fridges that he seems to be encountering in the wild a lot. Once again, Matt Lilley, Lilley 9 on Instagram. I'll have links to those in the show notes. So thanks again to Matt for joining us. I apologise about the delay. Life got away on me a little bit there, but hopefully you've enjoyed that and you've learned a little bit about rugby just before tuning in to the grand finals of the Rugby World Cup this 28th, whenever it was. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm putting this together rather hastily. So the 29th of October at 8 a.m, check out the Rugby World Cup, New Zealand versus South Africa. As always, I'm on all the social media platforms at Taylor Ruddle Comedy. Check out Can Do Comedy to see what gigs I've got coming up. And by the time this releases, I have 3 shows left in the tour with David Correos. Thursday night, Sprig and Fern Merivale unfortunately sold out, but then on Friday night we're heading up to Motueka to play the Imaginarium. Really excited about that. Still heaps of tickets left for that, so get in or recommend people to come and check us out if you are in that part of the world. And then Saturday night we are at Studio One for 2 shows in Nelson. The first show is almost sold out, and there's still heaps of tickets in the second show, so definitely nudge people along if you know them in that part of the world. Thanks again for listening. We will be back next Monday to your regularly scheduled programming, and I look forward to chatting with you then. Ruddler over and out.